There's something about Arena Breakout Infinite's gunfights lately that has been bothering me. And it's not the guns, it's not the ammo, it's not even about the armor. It's these little strategies that players have discovered that give them an advantage simply because of the other person not doing the same thing. And once these strategies become effective, they don't just stay niche for very long. When one player discovers something, someone else will copy it, then another, and another, and another. And eventually, everybody is mostly doing it because if you are not, you will be the one on the losing side of things. And that's exactly how a little bit of cheese eventually becomes a meta. And right now, I think the flashlight meta is probably one of the best examples of this. Because I'm sorry, but a flashlight in an extraction shooter should be used to illuminate dark areas. It shouldn't become a weapon that you deliberately use to blind another player in the middle of a gunfight, and potentially even blind them in real life. And once the game starts rewarding you for doing such a thing, what are you supposed to do? Do you just accept the disadvantage, or maybe you turn the other cheek and start doing it yourself? And from that point is where I think ABI's gunfights start becoming less and less enjoyable. Let's talk about it. Now, before I get into the flashlight meta specifically, I just want to clarify what I mean when I say cheese. Because I'm not against players finding strategies that work. That's literally the part of playing a competitive game. If you find a good angle, a good rotation, a good way to use a grenade, or some clever way to approach a fight, that is completely fine. That's game knowledge, that's also part of the gameplay fun. The problem starts when the mechanic gives you too much of an advantage that it becomes something that you almost feel forced to use. Because by then, it stops being an interesting strategy and it becomes the meta. And once it becomes the meta, you don't really have a choice anymore. You either learn it and use it yourself, or you accept that you're going to lose the gunfight because of this disadvantage. And I think that's an important distinction. The problem isn't that someone found a way to win. The problem is when everybody has to copy that same way of winning. We've seen this kind of a discussion from ABI communities with this over-spamming of grenades, jump shotting, and now especially flashlights. A recent August discussion even grouped flashlight spam, jump spam, grenade spam, and smoke spam together as strategies that players feel are damaging the core gameplay of Arena Breakout Infinite. Let's talk about the most obvious one right now: flashlights. And I have absolutely no problem with flashlights being useful. In fact, I think they should be very useful. If I'm entering a dark building, a dark room, or some underground area, I should be relying on my flashlight to actually help me see. That should be the intended purpose of the attachment. It's a tool of illumination. But somewhere along the way, the flashlight kind of stopped being a primary source of illumination and transformed and started becoming a combat strategy. And I think the biggest problem right now is simply how bright these fucking things are. You can be fighting somebody outside in an environment that's already relatively bright, and suddenly someone turns on a flashlight and they have the sun in the palm of their hands. And this is not something I just noticed. There are recent community posts specifically complaining that the flashlights are excessively bright, including players complaining about being blinded by them even outdoors during daytime raids. One recent post received more than 300 upvotes, with multiple players suggesting a anti-glare feature or face shield solutions. And I think that's where we need to ask ourselves, what is the flashlight actually supposed to do? Is it supposed to help me see? Or is it supposed to help me win a gunfight by making it harder for the other player to see me? Because those are two very different things. And here's the part that actually makes this even worse. The fact that you can bind your flashlight activation, your flashlight toggle, to your firing input. You would immediately think, okay, I need to put my flashlight toggle here. So you can essentially make it a part of your firing mechanic. Once you shoot, the flashlight turns on. Once you press the button again, the flashlight turns off. You shoot again, it turns on again. And now this supposed illumination tool has become a strobe light and has become an effective weapon of your arsenal. The community has been complaining about this specific interaction for weeks now, and recent feedback threads have specifically called for the flashlight to require a manual activation instead of automatically switching when firing, while other players have suggested simply disabling the ability to bind it on the fire button. And honestly, this is where I think the argument becomes pretty simple. I'm not saying someone is bad for using it. If the game allows it, and it gives you some advantage, of course, people will be using it. But that's exactly the problem. If I don't use the flashlight meta but you do, you'll be giving yourself a big advantage that I do not have. So what happens? If I want to win, I should start using it. And then everybody starts using it. And eventually, the flashlight isn't really a tactical attachment anymore. It just became another part of the PvP meta. And this is the part that bothers me the most, because this doesn't just apply to the flashlights. It applies to almost any mechanic that provides a strong enough advantage. It starts with somebody discovering something, then that person gets an advantage from it, other players will see it, maybe a streamer uses it, maybe somebody posts a guide about it, and suddenly more people learn it, then more people use it. And eventually it becomes so common that not using it is becoming the disadvantage. And that's the part I do not like, because the strategy isn't really optional anymore. It's expected because it's the meta. And in this game, if you want to compete, you're almost forced to participate or be part of the meta. We've seen similar community frustration about utility spam, where a recent discussion described players bringing a huge amount of grenades, gas, stuns, you name it, and they just bring it into gunfights, while other players argued that excessive utility becomes such a crutch when it's overused. And I'm not bringing that up to say grenades are bad either. Grenades are supposed to be powerful. The problem is when the most effective way to win a fight becomes throw another nade, then throw 10 more. And you just have to look at the entire picture and say, is this actually a gunfight or just a grenade throwing contest? And then we do have jump shotting. This is another mechanic where I think the game has slowly changed what players are expected to do during a gunfight. Jumping around a corner while shooting used to have a pretty obvious trade-off. You're moving unpredictably, so you should be making yourself less stable. That's supposed to be the compromise. But ABI has systems that make jump shooting significantly more viable. We are now seeing players combine movement, jumping, and flashlight usage into the same engagement. There is an active community discussion about this exact combination right now, with players arguing that jump shotting has become too arcade-like and that returning to less stable jump shooting mechanics should improve things. And again, I don't think the person who innovated this or thought of this is actually a bad person. If you can jump, track me, and kill me, there's obviously some mechanical skill involved to that. But I think the question we need to ask is, should the game be encouraging this kind of behavior in the first place? Because if you give players a mechanic that should be a disadvantage, then actually turn it into an advantage, players are naturally going to abuse it. And eventually, everybody's going to be jump shooting every single corner. And I already know what kind of responses we'll get from this kind of a topic. Just use the flashlight, just jump shot, just bring more nades. And honestly, that's exactly the problem. If the answer to every complaint about a certain mechanic is, why not just do it yourself? Then we've already accepted the mechanic is now mandatory. If flashlights are annoying, just use one. If everybody is jump shooting, just do the same. If everybody is throwing grenades, bring more and more nades. But that's not actually solving the problem. We are just normalizing it. And eventually you end up with a game where everybody is using the same handful of extremely effective strategies because not using them is simply putting yourself in that disadvantage. And that's not the kind of meta that I personally would enjoy. And I want to be clear on something here. I'm not asking ABI to become perfectly balanced. This is an extraction shooter. It's supposed to be unfair sometimes. You're supposed to make better decisions, to find advantages, to use equipment intelligently, and even outplay people. I'm completely fine with that. What I'm not fine with is a mechanic that provides such a big advantage that it stops being about decision making and starts becoming about who abuses the mechanic first. And there's a big difference in both. If I lost a gunfight because someone was in a better position, I take it, that's fair. If someone heard me, predicted where I was going, and caught me off guard, that's on me. If someone had better timing, better aim, or simply made a better decision, I can completely respect that. But if I lose a fight because somebody turned on their flashlight and I couldn't see shit, that's when I start questioning the mechanic. And here's where I don't want this video just to become another quote-unquote complainer video, because I don't think flashlights need to be removed. I actually think they should stay, as they should. They just need a better counterplay. And there are several ways maybe more fun could approach this. One idea I really like is giving a certain equipment some level of protection against flashlight glare. Maybe tinted face shields, anti-glare lenses, some certain gas masks, something that reduces the intensity of the light being emitted toward you. And this is not something I'm just making up. There are already community discussions specifically asking for tinted face shields or protective equipment against flashlights. There are also some players pointing out that some gas masks may already provide anti-flash protection, although the exact interaction with a flashlight glare is kinda not sure yet. And that's the kind of system that I'm looking for. I don't want to become immune to the flashlight. I want to be able to mitigate it, to control it. Maybe you wear a particular face shield and the glare is reduced by 30%. Maybe another piece of equipment reduces it even further. So with that, you've already provided some options. Do I bring this equipment because I'm expecting people to use flashlights? Or do I sacrifice that protection for something else? That's the counterplay. And I think counterplay is a much healthier approach than simply saying, just use the flashlight yourself. Another option is to make flashlights more expensive. It is another simple solution that more fun studios tends to do when they're nerfing something in this game. Make it cost more. The game already does this with the weapons and attachments that they feel like are overused. If something becomes extremely powerful or popular, the price can be adjusted. So if the flashlights become a mandatory part of the PvP meta, increase the cost. Not really to an over-the-top amount, but just enough for players to actually think about if they're going to be using one or not. Because right now, if the attachment gives you a big advantage and costs very cheap, there is very little reason to not use it. And that's how we approach the oversaturation of the meta. If everybody can afford the cheese, everybody will use the cheese. Another option is to give the flashlight an actual activation animation. And this might be my favorite solution of them all. Give the flashlight a proper activation and deactivation animation. If I want to turn it on, I actually have to see my character turn it on. Maybe it's a half second, maybe something longer, whatever feels right in the timing, but make it a deliberate action. Because now I have to make a decision. Do I expose myself by turning on my flashlight, or do I keep it off and maintain my stealth? And from there, that's an actual tactical choice. And if I'm in the middle of a gunfight, I shouldn't be able to instantly turn on a flashlight on and off with zero commitment. There are already community suggestions along these lines, including disabling the fire button trigger and adding a longer activation time or animation. Solution number 4 could be don't let it be tied to the fire button. And honestly, this seems to be the easiest fix. Just don't allow the flashlight to be bound in the same input as the fire button. If it's supposed to be a tool for illumination, make the player intentionally activate it. That alone would remove a huge part of the cheese. You don't have to remove the flashlights, you don't have to make them useless. You don't even have to reduce their brightness dramatically. Just remove the ability to turn them into an automatic part of your firing mechanic. And solution number 5 is, yes, lessen the fucking brightness. I don't need to stare into the sun because someone attached a flashlight on their weapon. If I'm inside a dark building, make it bright. That's okay. If I'm outside in broad daylight, tone that shit down. If somebody points it directly at me, sure, I should experience some glare, but there should be a difference between this flashlight is making it harder for me to see and I literally cannot see, the sun is in my eyes. And I think that's the line that ABI kind of crossed. The flashlight is just one of many examples. The bigger issue is what happens when these mechanics become so effective players feel forced to adopt them, because by then the game begins to develop around those mechanics. The community discovers the strongest strategies and everybody copies it, and the strategy becomes the meta. And when the meta becomes the expected way to play, suddenly the gameplay that existed before this specific strategy becomes less viable. And that's how you slowly change the identity of a game. Not necessarily through one giant update, but through dozens of little mechanics that give each player another way to gain an advantage. And eventually, you look at the game and think, when did we start playing like this? I don't think the solution is to remove everything that gives players some advantage. And I don't think the players are necessarily the problem. If the game gives you a powerful strategy, people are going to use it. That's what players do. The responsibility is on the developers to make sure that those specific strategies have meaningful trade-offs and counterplay. Because that's what I think makes a healthy meta. A strong mechanic should give you an advantage, but your opponent should have a reasonable way to respond. And that's where you create decisions, you create variety, and that's what keeps your gunfights from becoming stale, turning into the same interaction over and over and over again. Because once the cheese becomes the meta, it actually stops becoming the cheese, it becomes the game. And that's what I don't want to happen to Arena Breakout Infinite. I don't want the best player to be the person who knows the most advantages in this game. I want the best player to be the person who makes the best decisions, who has the better positioning, who has the better timing, who understands the situations better, and ultimately who wins the gunfight. Because in my opinion, I think that's how it's supposed to be. Yet again, these are only my thoughts and I'd rather know about yours. Do you think flashlights, jump shooting, grenade spamming, and other mechanics, are these supposed to be part of ABI? Or do you think the game has started giving players too many cheap ways to win or gain an advantage? Do let me know in the comment section down below. Big shout out once again to the channel members. Thank you for everybody who have been joining my live streams. I really appreciate your presence. Also, if you want to meet up with some fellow Extraction shooter enjoyers, feel free to join the Extraction Reborn Discord server. The link invite is in the description down below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Thank you so much again for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.